So I wanted to show
It,
you guys something that I think will be super helpful in us deploying agents. And let me give you a little context on this, and then we can go and implement these agents on our own systems. So I found that in the last couple of years and using these AI agents and whatnot, that we could equip them as custom GPTs, where you teach one agent how to do that, and maybe it has access to a RAG, or maybe you train it up with a particular way of doing things, and you connect it to your information, right? Your CRM, your WordPress, your Google Ads, all that kind of stuff. But that requires that particular agent that we built be shared with all these other people. And that's what we've done with our business OpenAI account, which is why we've provided all of this. We paid for this on behalf of all of our folks in our program because that at the time that was the best way to do things because it made sense. Because if we trained up an agent that does SEO, which is what Stas wants to do, or analytics or auditing Facebook ads or whatever, then it made sense. If we build this agent, then everyone else could use that agent, right? That makes sense. But I've come up with something that's more elegant, and I think it will last us for a few years. And that's this. When I've been able to get these agents to do work, I have them also document what they did and publish those particular steps, which is what we call a meta article. And in the world of SEO, I think that works especially well because when we have a lot of roofing clients, or yesterday we did one for, yeah, it was for Ethan. Ethan's got 27 roofing and siding and as part of the mothership of Infinity Exteriors. Then there's an intelligent way to cross-link between all of these. That drives great SEO because the mothership has got a lot of power, right? That we can drive to the individual locations. That also works because when the agency has a lot of power, like the Blitzmetrics site has a lot of power, and we write about here's the amazing things that George Palatachuk is doing with his companies, and oh, we met Brad Strawbridge in Atlanta. There's more stuff to repurpose. It's legitimate EEAT, and it passes DR62 link juice to sites that don't have much, and most local businesses have none. They can create a ton of content, but if they don't have any juice come into it, then what's the point, right? If there's no signal flowing, if there aren't links, if there's not citations, then it's almost like the content's not even being seen anyway. So, in having these agents document and publish them, which I would recommend, the idea of building in public, when we honor them, and it strengthens the whole knowledge graph because we're clarifying what the entities are and the objects associated with the entities. As these agents are documenting what they're doing, they're also able to improve the way that we do things. And that creates a recursive loop, which I was starting to show you guys last week. So as these agents are learning from each other and finding better ways to do that, provided that the agents have access to the Google Analytics and Search Console and Call Rail and all that, they can learn what's working and what isn't and tune the system and then tell us what they're doing. That allows us to update what I call the definitive article. So for every single task, we've created a definitive article on, like, you can almost hear the way I'm talking because I talk to the AI this way. I have a way of like structurally talking to it. I guess you call it vibe coding. But we have this thing called the task library with 1,000 tasks in it. And every one of those tasks is defined in a step-by-step SOP-like way. And it has a skill markdown file associated with it. So as an agent does a task, according to the definitive article, it generates a meta article showing how it did that particular task. And that creates juice for the underlying client, helps that page rank in a legitimate, not black hat buying link PBN kind of way, but a legitimate way because we have a lot of roofing companies, because we have the number one ebook site on the internet with 500,000 visits a day organically on Google, because we have all these other sites. We can link between each other in a legitimate way. And we can show that, and it's not a black hat buying link private network kind of thing. Plus, it shows that we are doing things in a legitimate way by the book, if you right, by Google standards, by the search quality rater guidelines, right? Which we have been teaching for years and years. So because you have a recursive loop that is, here, let me share my screen. Because there's a recursive loop in how we do things, then anyone who knows how to invoke those particular tasks can, I'll go to Jason Giamotto. Okay. Personal brand site. Okay. Then anyone who knows here, and I'll just open up Claude on the side here. Okay. And I'll say, actually, I'm going to use the whisper flow. I know we built this personal brand website for Jason, and we followed the definitive articles on how to build a personal brand website. And as a result, I know we also generated a meta article explaining what we did step by step for Jason's site. Please show me the definitive article that you used for this personal brand site. Show me the meta article that you also wrote detailing what you did here and explain why this creates value for Jason and for us, especially because this guy is super connected with Ken Goodrich, Tommy Mello, all these other guys that are big names in home services. Okay. So I think that the whole point of managing these agents is that we have to be able to think in a meta-like way because we're managing teams of agents. We're making it so that even if they mess up or hallucinate, there is a guardrail to improve these things. And then when it does the work, of course, you come in and have it QA its stuff and say, how do you make it better? And because you've got more, you have more persistence in the agent being able to do the work, then it can constantly improve. It can monitor, it can continue to work harder, it can burn more credits, it can do all these different things. So this site was completely built by these agents. Is it the most beautiful site? No, but all these sites that we work on, we're building not for beauty, we're building for performance, right? To rank, to drive phone calls, all of these kinds of things. So you can see it's going about doing its thing. And what I had created 10 years ago was the idea of this overall, I'll just show you a task library, created this library of all these tasks down to the most no-brainer stuff like how do you set up a tag manager container, right? And then how do you set up events and triggers and how do you do this and how do you do that? So there's 1,000 of them in here. And there's no way a human could come in and update these things, especially as it changes, right? Meta changes their way to do ads, and now Google's got AI Max, and there's all this stuff going on, right? And like Stas has a killer guy at Google does Google ads. We all have people who are killer doing our stuff. George, you have your Zach guy who's a killer, but it's not we're trying to replace Zach. It's that we want Zach to create 10 Zachs. So then I'd ask you, how do you create 10 more of yourself? There needs to be a documented high fidelity copy of how to do that. And then if that's published, then of course, Jason G. Amato personal brand website meta article. Okay. George Leith. Okay. So here's an example of one. How George Leith is well known in the world of local. He ran sales and revenue operations for Vendasta, scaled it to $1 billion company, right? Been a buddy of mine for 20 years. So we inventoried his podcast, which is significant, right? We turn each of those podcast episodes into an article. Then we turn those into stuff on his website. We figured out how much effort it would be. Is this necessarily oh, look, roofinglaunch.co, right? Nathaniel Stevens, who sold Yolda for $300 million, which at the time was the world's largest digital agency. I advised him when he was still a student at UPenn. So we built the site here. So, how Brady Sticker runs Church Candy, almost an 8-figure digital marketing agency serving churches. Client, right? Here, meta article template. So as the agent does work, it improves and it learns. And these things get more recursive. The more content you have, the more it has to tie together as part of this SEO tree concept, which is everything ties together instead of articles that are all by themselves, which is, I think, the biggest problem in SEO is you have people just generating stuff without context. So they step on each other, right? We show how it ties to the 4-stage content factory, which of course has sub-steps within each of them. And this is what you do, right? And this was actually written for agents. This is not written for humans to understand. This is written for agents to understand as they are going through these checklists to do this and do that, right? How we built. So instead, anytime we have a checklist, anytime we have a task on how to do something, we always want to show dozens of examples of that task in action, right? It's one thing to say, oh, here's the SOP to do whatever, set up local service ads. But here it is. It even created a diagram showing how to do that. And it inventoried his stuff, talked about the decisions it had to make along the way. If we were to take a human, it would be this and that, but actually it's a lot. So anyway, just it's documenting this stuff. Is it beautiful? No. But the important point is that from an SEO standpoint, all these entities are tied together. So Jason as a person is an entity, his company is an entity, the other people that he knows as entities, the other geographies that he's in as entities, these other companies and conferences that he speaks at, those are entities. So we all know that for SEO, what is the most powerful way to rank in something is to get links and votes from existing entities that have a lot of power. So if this one happens to have a lot of power because it's a DR62 and we have all these other sites and we are legitimately farming the juice out of these and we're building cross links between them because we also have a definitive article on how to internally link between different sites, then all of you guys, for this example, but it's not only here, but I'm showing you this will work for SEO, for example, but not only for SEO. So then what we would have done was we'd say, okay, inside our ChatGPT, we've created a bunch of agents and these agents do all the stuff, right? Having custom GPTs, I think, is an outdated way of doing stuff. And we just stumbled upon this accidentally because the Claude 20x max account is not available in the enterprise. The top level in enterprise is 6x, which for what we're doing is just not enough, right? And then if you're using 6x and you run out of credits and then you need to go to extra usage, you'll just get crushed, right? And it went to my Google Photos, grabbed all these things, and it followed our article guidelines on how to do that, right? Or repurpose YouTube videos into a blog post, because it crashed. I ran out of power on this thing because it's running 24/7, right? It's going through, like on this one, for example, it's going through the 800 some podcasts that I've been on, and it's doing an inventory on all these, right? But as it's doing it, I'm saying, keep track of what you're doing, write a meta article on it, and also update Basecamp. It could be ClickUp, it could be like whatever it is. That way everyone knows what's going on. And I'm not even ashamed to say, I even have it say, and don't try to pretend that you're me, say I'm Dennis's agent. So you may have seen emails that come from me and it says, this is Dennis's agent. I just want to let you know, this is what we did, right?
How do you get it to load your Chrome integration chats in the desktop app? Because mine are completely separate. And so my Chrome extension has no context of some of the stuff that I'm trying to do because they don't
Yeah.
populate the same.
So when you have connectors here with the Chrome connector, because I like to do, that's a really good question. Most people don't know this, but most of the work I launch from Cowork instead of, even though I'm having it do a lot of stuff that's browser driven instead of API driven, because some things are API driven, which we can talk about, versus browser driven. But why would I want to launch it from Cowork when I could be right here in the browser and then just talk to it and have it do stuff while I'm doing it? Things that have sustained effort, where there's a lot of stuff it needs to do, then I want to do it in Cowork because then I can activate walkie-talkie, right? I can use dispatch, and then while I'm out and about, my computer's on, and so it's talking back to the computer. If it's something like a one-off, like I'm just doing this one thing as we go, and it's not something that's sustained effort, or something that I want to turn into a task, like a repeatable task that we put in the library, then yeah, just as you're messing around, yeah, do that here. But when you find something that you want to eventually tune into a task, then you're going to move to Cowork. And then Cowork has more sustained effort. It's less likely to fall apart. Stuff in the browser is just heavier. It burns more tokens. Like when you do stuff here, it is taking screenshots on the way, which is ridiculous because that like, this long thing is taking all these screenshots. That's ridiculous, right? I know they said they
So
moved
so in
made it easier to
Cowork,
use.
you'll be able to Cowork can then go use the Chrome extension if you have it as your connector, and
Yeah,
then it'll report on it in the chat because you launched it from Cowork.
yeah. So
Oh,
then,
okay. That makes a lot more sense.
so I'll rather than tell you, I'm just gonna do it. Okay, watch this.
Yeah,
So
please do.
this morning, I interviewed Eric Huberman of Hawk Media, who has a $700 million a year agency, world's largest digital agency, fastest growing agency. He's bought 23 agencies in the last couple of years. And he reached out to me saying, Dennis, I know you're super connected with agencies. I'm buying agencies. And I had a great Zoom call with him. There was another one yesterday, which you can look at as well. But go into my Zoom, or you can look at my email because Zoom sends a transcript and sends the recording and all that, and grab the conversation that Eric and I had. And I want you to turn that into an article that lives on blitzmetrics.com. And then I want you to follow our article guidelines on blitzmetrics.com so that it's authoritative, it has EEAT, it makes him look good, obviously. And our objective is to repurpose our conversation where he talked about how he is not there to be like PE and gut a company. He keeps all the people. And you could look at the 23 acquisitions that he's made as a track record to see how awesome they are and see how he's a growth partner for companies that want to grow. Of course, he does talk about there's some guys who just want to get out of the game because AI is coming or they're just tired of running an agency, which is tough. And there's a path for that too. But there's something really cool about spending time with real people that I've met in person in many cities over the years instead of AI generated slop on here's a calculator on what your agency's worth, where you put in your information and your revenues and your ad backs and all that kind of stuff to figure. Yeah, we can do all that, but I want you to show the real signal of Eric and I. And in that Zoom call, you can take some screenshots of that Zoom call to grab some of those moments where he's walking around and I'm looking somewhere else or whatever it is, just to show those lightweight moments. And maybe even grab a screenshot of the Zoom that Eric and I did. It wasn't yesterday, but I think it was like 4 days ago. We had another Zoom call to talk about this. And I was so inspired when he reached out. I said, we should do a podcast episode on this rather than you just telling me, hey, Dennis, I'm buying agencies. Let's actually talk about that. Let's talk about how the agencies you bought are successful. Let's talk about how, even though you have an AI fund and you've invested in other AI companies, that you're not in your AI forward and you have an AI team that helps your agencies grow. Yet you're going the exact, everyone else is running for the emergency exit in the agency space because ChatGPT is now my agency. Yet you're going the other way. So you're either really dumb or you're really smart. So I want that to come through. I want this to be provocative, but also agency folks who want to grow and recognize that there's huge power in being part of Eric's mothership, where he's got the ops, he's got the tech, he spends millions of dollars a year on platform stuff so that these founders can be just as they are, or if they need help, they've got the whole team to rely upon. I want you to show how Eric is winning in spite of AI. We're using AI to help him grow. And these other agencies that suck, that don't really deliver value, they're getting crushed by AI. So the fire either refines the gold or it burns off the chaff. So lots of angles here. Think about it carefully. Make Eric and I look good. Pull in signals of Eric and I from over the years. Look inside my Google Photos and you'll see that there are a lot of pictures of me and Eric. We were in Miami last month, both speaking at this conference, DealCon, which is buying and selling companies. We've both spoken in Austin at digital marketers events, training other agencies, TNC in San Diego. I've toured his offices in Santa Monica. There's a lot of real experience and trust that shows that it wasn't just some dude I met last week. So turn that into an article and anything that you think I'm missing, I'm totally open to that. Don't do only what I'm saying. You've got the programmer systematic mind. How many other systems is this thing going to need to reference to be able to do the thing that I'm saying?
Are you actually asking me?
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably pull up your Google Photos. What else is it hooked into?
Yeah, I've got all of them connected. So it's got to go to, yeah, my photos, it's got to go to my Zoom, it'll go to my email, It'll,
Oh,
when
that's cool.
it
Yeah.
grabs the transcript, it's going to pull that. It's going to take screenshots. It's going to log into the WordPress on blitzmetrics.com. This is like you give this to a person to do. How much effort is that?
Yeah.
So
I
I gave
mean,
a lot of
it
stuff
would
to
take you
do.
hours to do that yourself, for
Yeah.
sure.
And then if I were to, even if you gave it to some VA in Pakistan, right? So how long did it take me to tell it what to do?
Few minutes, maybe.
Okay. And then I just move on to the next thing. And all of a sudden I've got 10 or 20 of these guys, girls or its or whatever they are, doing the stuff. So with AI, I'm as effective as 20 VAs. And then if I teach other team members how to do that, and some VAs can make the transition. Most VAs can't because of their limited ability to think, and they're just robots and they are task workers and they don't understand the higher context. They don't understand how to provide context because they only do work if they're given context. But did you notice how I also made sure to reference how to do stuff? So when I say to do something, to write an article or edit a video, or I tell it that we have guidelines on that. And I explicitly say we have guidelines on how to do that. Because if you don't give it the guidelines, your SOPs, whose SOPs is it going to use? The internet's, right? And I also gave the necessary context of how I'm connected with Eric Huberman and his agency and other agencies that we have. And even if you're not an agency, I want you to see how including the context creates entity strength. Because when this gets turned into a LinkedIn post and a Facebook post and a YouTube and all that, because we repurpose, Eric's going to see it and he's going to share it, right? And that creates great signal that Google sees. And you can see, look, it's already doing this stuff, right? Oh, found the Zoom recordings, grab the email, make the article. So this, I'm going to guess this will take an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. But I'm going to sit here and watch this thing as it's going through the list? No. I'm moving on to the next thing, right? And then once I've learned how to do it, and I've documented the recipe, then other cooks can follow my recipe, right? Because then it's going to write an article about how it did this. Now, this is something most people can't get their heads around. So the fact that it can do all this, that's pretty cool, right? But the next level of thinking is, okay, now that I've gotten it to do it, did it document? It needs to write an article documenting how it did, how many steps it took, about how many tokens, how long did it take, what was the necessary input, what kinds of things did I say in giving it directions that made it a good article? What kinds of things did I miss, right? What was it about my technique in giving it instructions that allowed it to then do all these things? And oh, also because it used these different connectors and had to log into these different systems, what were those systems and how to go about doing that? And if our definitive article on how to repurpose a YouTube or repurpose a Zoom into an article doesn't include that level of detail, and if we see other agents that step through that SOP trip, then go and enhance that. And in fact, go look at the other meta articles we've written on how we've repurposed a Zoom into an article. If you find that the agents are making the same mistakes, solve it at the root, right? Do you see that systematic way of thinking? That I just happen to be using it on this example, but it applies to any task that can be done through a computer, which is what all of us do, something through a computer, right? So then I would look at what Zach and Stas are doing, because you guys are basically running, whether you call it a SaaS or an agency, there's a lot of roofers, a lot of fence people. All of them are very similar in the kind of business they have. There's some differences, whatever, but it's similar, okay? Because they're local businesses, they need to get more phone calls and someone has to answer the phone and close the deal and all that, right? But aside from that, it's very similar, right? The model of home services. When you show people all these stats, which is tons and tons of charts, they don't understand that, especially because they're small business owners, right? So what you do is you show them in kindergarten, red, yellow, green colors, stoplight method, whatnot, what's working, what's not working, so they can appreciate it. You have to actually tell them explicitly, this is good and this is not good, right? Okay, we had this many calls, this many were answered, this many turned into deals, this many were whatever. Yeah, that's great. You can show that, but if you don't provide the context against that, if you don't show how do you stack in a percentile way against the other companies, if you don't show if you're above or below the benchmark, if you don't give them a set of recommendations, we call that metrics, analysis, action, right? That's a sequential way of problem solving. Then they don't get the value. They just get a ton of charts. So I see a lot of SaaS companies and agencies They just generate this 100-page report of nonsense. See, ta-da, put the logo on the thing. It's a 100-page keyword ranking report. What's this? Am I paying in bulk of number of pages, or can you tell me what this actually means? What I was telling George earlier, Zach, was instead of trying to build, I don't, you may or may not be doing this, but a lot of agencies and SaaS folks, they think that they should just create more and more screens of showing this data and that data. And you can, but people never log in and see that. What you do is you send that owner a simple text every day, or driven by whatever, by a cron or by some sort of event that happened, telling them what's going on like a human would, in plain English on what's working. And I think that does like 90% of what an account manager would do. So whether you're an agency or a SaaS, I think it's the same thing because you're a service company. There's no difference today between a product and a service as far as I'm concerned. I think they're the same thing. So they want to know, how is their stuff doing? And they don't want to have to come ask you or come complain. And now you got a support ticket and all that. And now you're behind the 8 ball because it's worse when they come to you versus when you come to them and you be proactive. Because then they know you're on top of it. Then they know you're looking over their business. And then anytime you actually have to talk to them, you're going to spend time talking about, it's going to be a positive conversation. You're going to be celebrating wins as opposed to like dealing with complaints. It's that guy. Every time you get a call, it's going to be a complaint. Someone's not happy about the robot said something wrong or wasted tokens or I don't know, whatever it did, right? I would just love to have the human interaction be celebrating instead of.
Zach, I think it'd be valuable if we could do something like that. Send out some sort of, obviously have the reports and everything live in the dashboard spelled out easily so that they can understand it and log in whenever they want. But it also would be valuable, like every Friday, to have a weekly email come out from Annabelle's account as if it's coming from her, being like a 2 to 3 sentence report of, hey, here's what happened this week. Here's what we saw. Here's what blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know what's
great
neat about that? It's not hard to do. So we had Quiznos as a client for a few years, and they had 5,700 locations. So the first month or two, you would not believe like how many people were calling me directly. I'm like, I cannot talk to 5,700. I know all you guys are important. It was your life savings to open up a Quiznos and whatever, but I'm not the guy. Because everyone's like, oh, Dennis is the guy. He knows so much. You can ask him questions. Oh, it's not that I don't want to help you. There's too many of you, okay?
Literally what we're dealing with, just like times 100.
They were paying us $85,000 a month, so that was kind of good too. But then again, that comes in, you have to decide, okay. But so then I invented, if I'm, maybe that's too big of a word, but I create this framework called MAA. And so we want everyone, human or not, to submit a report every Friday following MAA. And then I created this video. I was so pissed at people that were submitting garbage MAA reports, because what they would do is they go and they'd screenshot stuff from their high level and their Google ads and whatever, and they just drop in a whole bunch of screenshots and say, ta-da, that's the report, 20 pages of screenshots from all these different systems. And I'm like, there's no analysis here. What's good? Okay, this number's clicks are up and spend is up and down, and this number's up and down. So what? What does that mean? Is it seasonality? Am I profitable or not? My CTR is 1.7%. Is that good or bad? Talk to me like a business owner, right? Translate it into something meaningful, not all just this, oh, you rank on 498 keywords. What the hell does that mean? Right? So this video explains, how do you translate it into real business terms so you're not just dumping a bunch of data at people? And so metrics start with the business metrics, then to the analysis and the action. And the beauty is that we've documented how this is done. And so almost every single task has a skill file associated with it, which you can then point your agent to. So as you're telling Claude or whoever what to do, you can say, I want to set up a weekly Friday report following the Blitz Metrics MAA process. And what you're going to need to grab is data from this system and that system. And here's some examples of ones that I've done myself, just so you can see like how I did it. But certainly don't use that as my way or the highway. And I want you to start doing it I want you to do it for the first 3 of my 140, right? Just so I can look at your work and see if you're doing it right. See if we can make it nicer. Maybe there's a couple charts that we can visually make it nicer. Not some gigantic report, but these guys are on their phone. They're not going to read this giant email. No one likes to read these long emails, right? Just to make it fun and interesting, maybe bold key points, maybe celebrate good things, right? And that way they see there's an ROI in being with us. I've done a couple of them, and here it is. Here's how I've done a couple of them myself. Now, can you go ahead and do that? And it does a few of them, and you give it some feedback, because obviously it's not right the first time, because you have to, it gets you like 89% of the way, but then you talk to it until you get it to the point where you're happy, right? Then you say, that's awesome. I'd like you to set that up as a cron kicking off at 6 a.m. Friday every morning. Do it for everyone inside this list. Here's where you go and pull the list of our active clients, right? Isn't that
Do
the
you
way to
mind
do it? I've never heard anyone talk about this idea of the recursion, where it's documenting what it's doing so that there's an article about that particular instance of execution. And then there's an overall definitive article on how to do that task. And there's a whole library of all the tasks. And maybe it's because I've been doing it for 25 years. I'm like the squirrel that's been collecting tasks for years and years. And everyone else in digital marketing, if you ask them who's got the most SOPs, they'll say it's Dennis. Because who else really loves SOPs as much as I do, right? And if anyone else has a better SOP for any particular thing, I'd love to have that. It's not that it's got to be mine. If you have it, I want to ingest it, right? And the beauty is us by publishing it out here, if you can merely call it, if you can say the MAA, follow the MAA process that Dennis teaches, or that's on Blitz Metrics or Local Service Spotlight or whatever, we replicate stuff to many places, then you don't even have to have a skill MD file. Because before we were passing around all these skill MD files, we were training up individual agents, and then we have to share the agent. But then if that agent was central to us, you'd have to give that agent access. I'd rather you have your agent has access to all your stuff. And then you don't even have to call or pull these skill MD files. You can just verbally reference that, or the agent knows that when you say this one thing, that represents a block of 4 or 5 skills to execute that next chunk. Does it make sense? I just feel like this is a way more elegant thing. And sometimes I think I must be crazy. I don't hear anyone else saying this. But maybe they're just so stuck in the AI hype that they're not hands-on in the thing like we are.